I will look here at how to solve a quadratic equation using square roots. Okay, you're going to see some equations that are quadratic. Remember, quadratic means highest power 2. Right? But that only have an x squared and not an x. If you have an x squared and not an x, then square roots are a great method to use, probably the preferred method. When there's only an x squared, it's easy to isolate. Okay, if you had x squared and x, if you had both of those, it would be, you can't isolate one without the other one getting in the way. When there's only the x squared, I can easily isolate it. So I'm going to add 11. Okay, divide by 5. Natural steps. If you solve an equation, this is natural to do. Use a calculator if necessary. X squared equals 16. We're interested in solving for x, not x squared. So how do you get rid of a square? We do the inverse operation, which would be to take the square root. The square root of 16 is 4. Now there's an issue here. Instructions, which I didn't write, are to solve. Remember, when you solve something, you're finding the value of the variable that makes the equation true. Well, in this instance, if you just start right here and go down, what makes this true? What squared equals 16? Well, 4 squared equals 16, but so is negative 4. Negative 4 times itself is also 16. For that reason, by definition, when you take the square root of x squared, it's technically the absolute value of x. Now, nobody ever writes this. Okay, so you probably don't want to write it either. But if you remember back to when you solved absolute value equations, if you've done that, to get rid of the absolute value bars is to put a plus or minus over here. Okay, so the correct answer is x equals plus or minus 4. Now to clarify, that means that we have two solutions. X is 4 or x is negative 4. And that's what this plus or minus means. It just is an efficient way of writing 4 and negative 4 at the same time. Now to clarify, if we just asked independently, what's the square root of 16, and that's all you're being asked, you say 4. You don't say plus or minus 4. This would just be 4. This is called the principal square root. And for a problem where all you're asked is the square root, you generally only say that. But since we have the instructions solve, and there is a variable here, you could fill in this x with either 4 or negative 4 anywhere in the problem, and both would work. That's the reason we need this little plus or minus here. So it's confusing, why didn't we bother about the plus or minus before? Well, it's all about the instructions solve and the fact that this is an equation. So you just have to remember to put that plus or minus. Now that is a pretty easy detail, but it's very often forgotten. Okay, so a couple other examples here. 6x squared, excuse me, plus 1. I want to say that's 217. Same deal. Isolate x squared. Okay, easy enough. Naturally divide. And take the square root. Again, this is technically the absolute value of absolute value of x. But we can say plus or minus 6. Now, and again, to clarify, I think it's a good idea, especially at first, to write out 6 or negative 6. Okay, you do need both of those. They both work here if you're trying to solve. Okay. We'll show you one other type. Now, if you're in Algebra 1 right now, January 2021, you're not going to have to worry about this problem for now. I do want to show it, just so I can use this video again, maybe in future classes. Okay, what if we have something like this? All right, this one's a little bit harder because we have an entire quantity squared, but you still physically see only one variable. Now, if you were to FOIL this out or distribute it out, you'd have x squared and x. But since they're already sort of packaged together in one square, I can use the square root method here as well. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. Okay. Now at this point, I cannot add 1 because this 1 would belong to this square. Okay. The left-hand side right now is this entire thing squared. So I can't just pull 1 out of part of it when that 1 is really part of that square. So what I'll do instead is just immediately deal with the square by taking the square root. Okay. And this particular problem, we're going to get x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Like before, this is technically the absolute value of x minus 1, but we most often bypass that by proactively putting this plus or minus here. At this point, we would add 1 to both sides. You get sort of this weird looking. Now this is the whole number 1. This is the irrational number square root of 3. You can't, there's no way you're going to 4 out of that, because remember back when we were adding radicals, you can only add like radicals that are radicals that have the same number on the inside called a radicand. Okay, so this is the answer. Sometimes you'll see it left this way, but just to remind you, this would be 1 plus the square root of 3 or 1 minus the square root of 3. Both of those are correct. And we'll see some other examples of that, but this is the square root method. 2 points of emphasis to leave you with. Number 1, you can only do it if you see one variable. If you see one variable in one place, so if you see x squared and x, you can't do it. Also, make sure to put the plus or minus there.